Well, welcome everyone to our next Tempo Dialogue. Very glad to have you with us. Some of you, many of you have been at previous ones. We have quite a few new people as well. So the Tempo project is bringing together physical scientists, social scientists, and musicians to explore how we can use music to change the emotional climate about climate change, leading to a place of action. And through these dialogues, we are bringing together scientists and musicians to see what we can share, how we can inform each other about action on the climate crisis. Previous dialogues have often focused on a particular topic, such as when we looked at extinction and how we see it musically and scientifically. In this case, we're going to be looking at the process itself, talking about how science creates a picture of reality, as well as how music can use improvisation to create a different picture of different realities, and see what we can learn from each other about these processes. So we have two speakers today. We have Tapio Schneider, a climate modeler from Caltech, and Kikuko Maruo from Japan, a improvisational musician. We're going to start with Tapio giving us a bit of a presentation about how climate modeling is done and the processes here. Tapio is a professor of environmental science and engineering at Caltech here in Pasadena, as well as a senior research scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. His research group studies atmospheric dynamics, both here on Earth and on other planets, on scales from clouds to the globe, quite a range. To answer fundamental questions about atmospheric dynamics, such as what controls Earth's winds and precipitation patterns, the group analyzes observational data and performs systematic studies with numerical models, simulating flows ranging from meter scale motions in clouds to global circulations. Collaborating with other scientists, engineers, and mathematicians in the Climate Modeling Alliance, Professor Schneider's group also develops next generation models for weather forecasting and climate prediction. So we'll begin by asking Tapio to give us a short presentation about these issues.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Lucy. It's a true pleasure, and what a wonderful way to start any conversation with this terrific music. I wanted us to talk a few minutes about what we know about climate change, what's coming, and just a big picture of what we as scientists are currently doing about it. As Lucy mentioned, I lead this group called CLIMA, the Climate Modeling Alliance, which is about 70 mathematicians, computer scientists, earth scientists, software engineers at Caltech, at MIT, at JPL. And what we want to do is make climate science more accurate, make it faster, so that we can adapt to what is coming. So where we are, you have seen figures like this, I'm sure, before. This is Earth temperature over the last 140 some years. The Earth temperatures have been increasing, especially since the 1970s. We've had about 1.2 degrees centigrade warming since the mid-19th century already. The Conference of the Parties, the 27th edition, just started of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And as many of you know, the Paris Agreement stipulated that we should limit warming to 2 degrees, ideally 1.5 degrees. We already had 1.2 degrees warming, so we have 0.8 degrees to go to 2 degrees. It was 0.3 to 1.5 degrees, and that we will reach pretty soon. Conferences are all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That will have to happen. It's important to keep in mind that right now, greenhouse gas emissions globally are still rising. You see, these are total greenhouse gas emissions. It's carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and the like. They are still going up. There is a larger share of renewables now, but the renewables that do not lead in energy production, but the renewables have not led to a reduction in emissions so far. They've added energy production. So if you would want to limit global warming to 2 degrees, we would need to drastically cut global emissions. So here are some scenarios of how we may stay below 2 degrees warming, so only 0.8 degrees to go. And all of these scenarios have in common that emissions would need to peak in the next 2 or 3 years and then drastically go down in the next 7-8 years or so by, say, 27% by 2030 to have a chance to limit warming to around 2 degrees. If you would want to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, emissions would have to be cut by almost half by 2030. Now, I don't think that's terribly realistic to achieve, but it's good to illustrate the problem. So what this means is that I think at best, we will need to learn to live in a world that will be about 2 degrees warmer than in pre-industrial times, perhaps as much as 3 degrees warmer. And 2 degrees is the global warming. If you look at that regionally, here's a map of what this would mean regionally, say in the Arctic, Canadian Arctic or Siberia. 2 degrees global warming would imply 4 or 5 degrees warming locally. So while 2 degrees is a global mean number over land, generally you'll see more warming, and in high latitudes, even more. So this is what we'll have to learn to live with. And why we care is that a warmer atmosphere, a warmer Earth, is loading the dice for extreme events. Warmer atmosphere especially has more water vapor in it, and more water vapor means intense rain will get more intense. Here's just one example. This was Hurricane Harvey in Texas in 2017. It was devastating there. And scientists have estimated that the probability of rainfall, like what occurred during Harvey, the probability of that occurring was roughly tripled by the climate changes that's already occurred. So warmer world will mean more intense rainfall, hurricanes, typhoons, more wildfires, and the like. So if you would want to make a musical analogy here, is we're used to the rhythms, the themes, the tunes of climate over the last 11,000 years or so, the Holocene, the time when humans settled, built cities and the like. This is what we are used to, and we'll have to get used to and improvise living in a very different climate with different rhythms, shifts in the seasonal cycle, with different intensities of rainstorms and the like. And what we are doing at Klima, at Caltech, is trying to figure out what these rhythms will be. What are the tunes and themes of climate in the future? What is it we'll have to get used to? And the way we do it is we build models of the climate systems, physical models that model winds, temperatures, storms, and the like. And we are informing those models with data, satellite data from space, for example, or data from floats in the ocean, to represent especially small scale processes that are hard to capture in climate models. So for example, clouds. Clouds are very small in scale. They have scales of meters to tens of meters. And the climate model has a mesh on which we compute winds and temperatures. And that mesh is pretty coarse. It's maybe 100 kilometers on the side. So clouds literally fall through the cracks. And we use data to represent clouds in climate models because they're crucially important for understanding climate change, the climate we'll get. Clouds are very important for Earth energy balance, and how much warmer it will get depends very much on what clouds will do. And that is sort of day-to-day research, is figuring out how these small-scale processes like clouds, like ocean turbulence, or the land biosphere will react to climate change, and putting all of that in big computer models. And what we want to do with it in the end is produce climate predictions that everyone and all of you can use. Ideally would be things appearing on your phone that you can use to make decisions about real estate purchases, or in the financial sector, decisions about risks of investments, or planning in the developing world, which areas will be safe to build on, which ones won't, and the like. And our mission is to get to the point that everyone has access to good climate information for decision making, that any decision that has a reach of a decade or so will have to be informed by climate change, and we want to help inform those decisions. So this is what I do as a scientist. And again, I think the musical analogy, we've seen these wonderful dances, the music we've heard. Our job as a society, and the job for all of us, will be to improvise to new rhythms, to new tunes that the climate system will have in store for us, things we have never heard before, and that have not occurred this way during human existence on Earth. I'll leave it at that, and I have more time to discuss.
Thank you, Tapio. I think it's it's a pretty sobering thing. We aren't talking about how we stop this. We've got to do everything we can to slow it down, but we've reached the point that we need to live with it, and we need to find new ways and explore new spaces. And I had asked Kikuko Maruo to join us on this because her music does a lot of exploring new spaces and improvising as we go through it. You saw her piece Kyrie as we began this, and now ask her to talk more about this and about improvisation. Kikuko.
I think Kikuko-san is on mute. Okay. Hello. This is Kikuko Maruo, a composer. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak with you today, and thank you very much, Mr. Tapio, for your great talk on science. The opening music piece that you just heard was Kyrie, conducted by Ko Matsushita. This piece made me realize that I compose music based on the earth and its natural environment. This Kyrie has a score written on paper, but the next piece, Machikane, which you are about to see, is an improvised video work with no paper score at all. COVID triggered for the making of this video, as we were unable to hold in-person rehearsals and concerts with audience. This work was produced as a grant project to support cultural and artistic activities by Toyonaka City, and was recorded and distributed on YouTube in September 2020. During the COVID-19 situation, I called out to my surroundings to let's work on something interesting and fun in this situation. A violinist and 5-member vocal ensemble responded to me. I played percussion. The title of the piece, Machikane, was inspired by the discovery of a fossil crocodile that lived 450,000 years ago in Machikane Yama, Toyonaka City, the city which subsided us. Subsidized us. The members gathered on stage and attempted to improvise 8 times in a little over 2 hours. The first attempt was like, let's just do something. And after second session onwards, various suggestions were made by both members and myself, such as, let's all play percussion instruments aligned side by side, or let's use the Doric melody, such as D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D in English. Or there were some idea like, let's physically express and move freely on stage. And next idea was such as, let's leave the piano out and have the percussionist sit on the floor. Or the recording engineer suggested, let's create a sense of perspective by moving closer and moving further away from the 2 microphones. The rich, dense, and enjoyable time passed in a flash. And in the end, We made our 8th improvisation into a video piece. Throughout the whole process, what I found most important was that members should be able to stay in a relaxed state of body and mind and build a relationship of mutual trust, or to be understanding the mutual trust. I also found it important for each member to express himself or herself richly in an expressive way, while at the same time feeling joy and fun of the music created jointly. After the performance, members would say, "Oh, that was so fun. I want to do it again." And I was so happy to hear them say that. And I wanted to be improvising with them again. So I wish that the world, the planet will be maintaining its beauty and be working in normalcy. Now, please listen to an expert from Machikane. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So, oh, what do we feel with these things? I mean, I think that this is one of the hardest things. Thank you, Kikuko, for doing this. This is a realm of exploration that is really important to us. But I think I'm going to start by asking Tapio. I want to get you guys two talking, see what you have to share about this. And I don't know, is there a way that we can spotlight all three, Isabella? Yeah. And think about what, you know, I'm trying to look at what the correlations are, because when I look at it as both a scientist and an occasional musician, I find that it's, I recognize that modeling is, it is an interpretation. One of my favorite quotes about modeling is that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I suppose in the improv, you might say all are right, but some are more interesting than others. And, I don't know, how do you two, do either of you have comments about what, how you feel about what the other one is doing and what that could inform what you're doing or inform others' understanding of your work? Do either of you want to start with that bomb I'm throwing out to you?
Well, maybe should I start?
That would be
So-
great.
I lost the sound for a sec. Can you still hear me?
Now we can. But I think Kikuko was starting. Why don't we start there and then we'll come to you, Tapio. I'm sorry if you were losing your sound. Kikuko.
Oh, I'm very sorry. So what I work in the music and try to translate it into words, the linguistic words are very difficult for me. What I would like to express and what I would like to communicate, if I put it in words and languages, it's the most hardest tasks that I can face. But as a composer, as a musician, when living in the society, I should do this to some extent. That I noticed very recently. So there's various things that I would like to do and inform or perform. And I myself is doing this, acting on this because it is interesting for me and doing this all along. And that has led me to this improvisation music. The reason that this music that you just viewed came out in the COVID situation where everybody was in a daunting situation, everybody was looking down. And as a result, I wanted to encourage people, and that has been crystallized in the music. And Mr. Tapio has introduced us a lot of modeling, and you say future would be this and that based on your modeling. But for me, I did not have anything that to foresee or predict what is going to be the outcome. Within the members that gathered, there were some people that they knew each other. However, for some members, it was their first time ever meeting. And when they first encountered each other, some members felt, oh, we can get along very well. So that's atmosphere. And to the sound that they heard, it's not that they made great efforts to listen, but then the notes that they heard made them relaxing and make some movement or activity. So it was not something that was forced to do or what we intended to do consciously. So for my music, it's very important that people are moving in improvisation. Mr. Tapio shared with us about something. Also, he mentioned that we must be responding to something that humankinds have never experienced before. So that's another kind of improvisation. So you have to respond to an incident that is happening. And so in that sense, we are common for responding, but responding is actually important. That is what I thought. Thank you very much.
Tapio, the sound is gone again. No. You can, you know how to find your microphone? Oh, no. If you find the mute button down in the corner and beside it, okay. Oh, yeah, perhaps if you log out and log back in. Well, while he's gone, we'll get him back, but I have a question for Kikuko. I know that when we improvise in the Renaissance music that I play or in jazz, you start from a scale or a mode and sort of what are the acceptable notes within this, and then play across that. And that's always sort of struck me as sort of being like the scientific modeling, where you set up an algorithm to be the structures, and then you explore how the space looks. Is your improvisational techniques also the same thing, where you have an assumed set of possible notes? Or do you have a completely open structure? Do you feel like you have a structure within which you improvise?
Well, there is no structure per se. In this particular case, we roughly said, this many minutes to perform. So in that sense, there was that structure, because if it's too long, then when we turn this into a video for YouTube, it's going to be a trouble or problem. So we said, let's say 7 or 8 minutes would be good for this. So that's a big framework, if you will. And then the performers actually traveled from far, like violinists. So in terms of their transportation fee, we actually had our municipal agency to pay, which was a different framework that I had for the first time. I mean, even if just a little bit, there's some kind of compensation there, which is relieving for performers. I think it's important, not just for music. So we had that kind of funding backup, and then we were able to have a great venue to us as well. So that's another framework that we had. Now, among the members, one of the members, we had a Zoom meeting with them prior to the meeting, and I improvised something on my piano. I let them hear that for about 2 minutes, and that was constructed by Doric Melody. So we had Cs, if you will, that I let them listen to prior to the event. And then also, we actually asked them prior to perform, giving some notes, but that was canceled due to pandemic. So they had an idea that what I had originally wanted to do. So there's that kind of members that gathered. And the violinist was the one who had improvised with me before. So rather than verbally talking about what to do, they sort of know that if she does this, I will do this. There's this kind of chemistry and experience and known things that what we would do with each other. So we didn't have verbal framework so much. We didn't have too much time either. So we were like, okay, let's just gather and do it. So there was no real structure or framework. It's not that there wasn't nothing, but we didn't have really solid framework or structure. I hope this answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Tapio, have we got you back with a microphone?
I hope so. This was
Yes.
more improvisation than I intended to illustrate here.
Okay.
I don't know what happened, but I missed some things in between. But I think I resonated with some things Kikuko said about improvisation in her piece and how it goes. That there are perhaps little clues passed from one to another, and out of that emerges the music, the motion, and the like. And the climate system
not so much modeling, but the system itself does that, right? There was a hurricane, I said, in Texas, Harvey. We don't know, we cannot predict a few years from now whether there will be a hurricane in Texas or a typhoon in Tokyo. That depends very much on the improvisation the climate system does with the broad conditions we give it, how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. Small changes in what the atmosphere does, the famous butterfly effect, leads to improvisation by the atmosphere, and it might end up resulting in a typhoon somewhere, or it may not. It may end up in severe rainstorms in Pasadena, or it may not. And so what we humans do to the climate system is give it broad conditions, how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. And within those conditions, the climate system has its own music over which we have no control really. And we have to listen to that music, live with that music, and adapt to that music. What Lucy said, all models are wrong, some are useful. Part of that reflects this chaotic nature of the climate system and its improvisation, right? We can say something about averages and probabilities, but we cannot say very much about individual hurricanes, typhoons, and that's where the improvisation inside the model is happening. There's still some right and wrong and the averages and probabilities, right? That's again sort of the larger scale of the tune, perhaps, that we can get right or can get wrong. But what the climate system in the real world or in models does with it is very improvised and in many ways beyond our control.
I'm going to comment on that as a disaster scientist, that the random nature of disasters is what makes them so frightening to us. And therefore, it makes it difficult for us to get ready for them, since we don't know when, we just know eventually, yes. And I think that this is one of the things that's really important as we face up to our newer reality, is for people to understand the connection between the disasters and the climate. That the more carbon we put out, the more disasters we're going to be having. And that makes it a little more real, even if the time isn't. There are connections, but it's really hard for people to comprehend that there is that relationship that doesn't tell you this is happening today because of this reason. And that one's hard. I do want to invite, at this point, we are getting far enough into the process, invite anybody who would like to contribute to the conversation to raise hands. Yes, I think if we don't spotlight, or at least so that we can see, in this mode, I think we'll be able to see when somebody wants to raise their hand. I would love to have feedback from the many musicians and scientists in our group. Why don't we start with Makiko?
Hi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It's been wonderful to listen to all of you. What Kikuko said earlier about the condition for a good improvisation is to be relaxed and to enjoy the process is really important. And I think music allows our society for its members to relax and, maybe not enjoy, but really be ready for things as they come and to relax in the most, to react in the most sort of ways that make sense the most.
Thank you very much for your kind comment.
Is Makiko the only one who wants to contribute here, really? We've all been a part of this process. I mean, it's always hard to get the conversation going, but once we do, we usually really enjoy it. Anyone else who wants to comment at this point? I'll have to go back to Kikuko. Oh, Jim, go for it.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Improvisation is not always music to the ears of planners and policymakers. One of the things that we as planners want to do is to impose policy and structure and organizational expectations on nature. Nature doesn't typically cooperate, but the improvisation that's implicit in modeling, as Tapio said, is so important for us to know whatever we can know and accept the uncertainty. And the uncertainty is something that we need, even with plans, to respond to natural hazards in some meaningful way. So, you know, all of this is really important and all part of the process. But you know, I think from the standpoint of planning, we want to take the models, we want to take the insights and provide local government, state government, national governments, some opportunity to develop policies around the models that are created and provide some level of predictability. Of course, there isn't going to be perfect predictability. So, you know, again, improvisation is going to be a factor, but I think that we want to have plans, and climate change is very, very difficult to get our arms around because it requires international cooperation, which is very, very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's improvisation on various levels, and sure, if you want to plan, you like to minimize the improvisation, and you prefer to talk about risk management and manage the risks and know what the risks are and adapt accordingly. I would say, however, that in the face of climate change, I mean, what we do, the group at Caltech, Klima, is to try to help planners to give you the best possible information to make your plans. And I think we can do a lot better than the state of the art there. However, some uncertainty will remain. And I think part of what that will probably have to mean for planners is some more improvisation and planning will also become necessary. And what I mean is, say, if you built a seawall with which you want to protect a low-lying area, New Orleans or something, we'll try our best to give you a height of a 100-year storm surge event 30 years from now, and you can plan accordingly. But this may not be absolutely correct. And what this means is that even in planning, it may be good to build the seawall in such a way that you can make it higher without too much trouble if you need to a few decades from now. Allow for improvisation where you can. It may not always work, but in some structures that we are building, it may be a good idea to build them in such a way that uncertainty, the potential need to improvise, is built into it.
I think there is an issue, especially when we're talking about emergency managers. They tend to be people who, there's quite a few of them are ones who dislike uncertainty and lack of control. And so they move into this to try and take control in these chaotic times. And therefore, they're going to be looking for more certainty. It's like, you know, a classical musician that knows, you know, I play exactly what you tell me to, and I'm good at that. What do you mean? Pick the note you want. And there's sort of the same sort of attitude among many of the people who have to do the planning. Sean, it looked like you were about to say something. Turn off your mic. No, on your mic.
Yeah, I was just going to give a reflection in my response to the improvisation. I did miss the very first one, so there might have been something different. I'm sorry. But the second improvisation, I was intrigued that the texture of the whole was mostly made up of a little bit like the sounds of nature, where each creature gives its own thing that's different from everything else. So there was the soprano singer who sang very high notes and held them straight. And then there was the male singer who kept having his voice rise, and he was a stronger voice. And then there was Kikuko. You were making the percussive sound with lots of rhythm. And then I felt that the violinist was adding lots of texture and interesting color. But I was struck by the fact that when you started playing the rhythm, I thought the other musicians would start doing rhythm with you. But I think only the violinist came over and stood close. And the other performers kept doing their own thing. And as a listener, I appreciated the whole, the composite, but my brain also wondered, what would it have been like if the singers had responded more closely to your exact rhythm? In a sense, a greater level of cooperation. And James Goltz, I don't know your title or whatever, but he mentioned the word cooperation. And I was intrigued by what is the degree of cooperation or the degree of difference happening in this improvisation. And I felt that there was a great degree of difference, which made it very interesting to listen to. But I'm also interested in maybe a different improvisation where we say, let's learn more from each other. And if I start the rhythm, if I had been there, I like to play with other people. So I might have come over and stood by you and sang with your rhythm. And so for me, this is an interesting idea of if we're going to solve climate problems, we really have to cooperate. And so anyway, that was what I thought about.
Do you want to respond, Kikuko?
So for myself, there was no rule this time. We did not have any setting of the rules. So if I do this, please do this and that. Such an instruction was never given. And Machikane was intrigued by a replica of a crocodile found in the area 450,000 years ago. So the creature, the crocodile, has been a living creature of the planet for such a long hours. And surrounding that replica, there's greenery around. So everybody who is playing the music, not everybody can be seen from the stage. So everybody performing was not far away. However, they kept some distance and they were on their own. Therefore, they were not observing what others were doing. I myself was sitting on the floor. Therefore, I was not able to see whatever everybody was doing. So I was not conscious about whether they are wandering around or just moving around. So looking at the YouTube after all the performance, then I got to understand what we were doing. Therefore, for the YouTube making, I just mentioned, let's do it, do it, do it. And we gave no other instructions, no orders, but then everything turned out in a coordinated way. But in contrast, maybe we might not have created something that was full of energy. Should a rule was there, to have some sort of a performance that was distant, maybe we could have created much more powerful thing. However, we were in COVID situation, therefore it turned out that way. And as a result of the improvisation, we can't put or point any points how much we did well or not. I'm not quite sure if I answered your questions or comment, but that was what we were doing. So thank you very much, Sean-san, for the comment. I appreciate it.
I see several people nodding in agreement. I was wondering if they want to add more comments. I don't know if I sort of calling people out can be an embarrassing thing to do, but I would really appreciate it if you wanted to contribute ideas. And yes, I don't know how to say, great. I don't know how to say your name, but the one with the,
Sorry.
yeah.
My name is Kohei Konaka. In Japan, I am teaching children's for chorus and choral music. So I am working with Kikuko for the chorals with children, and I'm very happy to be participating today. And while working with children's choral, there's one big framework that today we will do this and that. However, whatever the children are going to be singing and what they are going to be expressing bodily, physically, there's many things that I cannot see or predict or foresee. Therefore, in such sense, I think that's improvisation in a sense. And as a teacher, how should I respond to the response with children is always my topic. And then after the response, things start rolling out and it develops. And then as a result, it is resulted in children's music. And I think that is related to what Ms. Kikuko just mentioned. The improvisation of a player is responded by another player. And as a result, we don't foresee or predict whatever is going to be created. However, with the relationship of trust, then as a result, a very good and solid piece is going to be created. So I think that is very similar is what we are doing. And as Mr. Tapio mentioned, the climate, weather is a chaos. And the climate chaos, we don't know as human being what is going to be inflicted on human beings and the earth. However, we should be responding. And the process of creating improvisation music and me listening and working with children to make a chorale piece and working for climate change using scientific models, there's something very common and I found it very interesting. Thank you very much for your sharing.
Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads on that. I think it's really wonderful. I was also really struck by the word you used of saying the relationship of trust, because I think that it's what you need to successful improv. You have to trust the people you're playing with, right? That's the absolute beginning. And to move forward on climate, we've got to start trusting each other and believing what's going on. So again, I think that's, of course, that's part of our motivation with Tempo. And one of our reasons we'd like to focus on choral music is because we see that as a place where people are already in relationship, a place where we form community to make it better. And that's what we're going to need here. Makiko.
Yes, thank you. That was really wonderful, Konaka-sensei. Thank you for that. I was inspired. I wanted to say something. So when we are coming together to improvise or to create music, we have this sort of underlying understanding of musicianship. Today, globally, I don't know if we have that humanity that we can count on. And I think music is one of the ways that can actually create this sense of bond, this sort of global citizenship, this sense of humanity, the pride of being a member of this human world. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Makiko. I think to me, that's exactly right. We've got to somehow, what needs to change for climate change is not just let's understand the model. It's how do we move from a place that we know it's going wrong to be able to sacrifice for each other and hopefully not have to sacrifice so much. I mean, I think one of the problems in the climate crisis is the belief that we have to give a lot up to address it. Whereas what we really need to do is figure out better, smarter ways of using our energy and making a good life rather than giving it up. And that means we have to trust each other to do it. And as we just heard, the trust in a choir, I think, is a model for what we need elsewhere. We are getting close to the end. Do we have, Tapio, do you have any last comments you would like to make?
Well, I just very much agree with what you just said, Lucy. I think it's important to realize that there is a solution to the climate crisis, and the solution is working together on new technology. And I mean, this is yet another area of improvisation, right? How new ideas come about, how a technological idea is passed from one person to another, grows into something coherent and whole, which in this case needs to be a technology for producing energy with renewables. It's not unlike how musical compositions come about by improvisation, and you need the trust, absolutely, of people working together across disciplines, across any kind of border, national borders and the like. This is an international problem and requires broad collaboration there.
Kikuko, do you have any final comments?
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm very happy to be here today. And although we're far apart currently, location-wise, but now we're connected online, and I can see your faces and your expression. There are some people who are not showing their faces, but then anyhow, I very much enjoyed this opportunity. Thank you so much for myself. So thank you so much. So grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I realized I didn't say at the beginning what I probably should have, which is about the next dialogue. We're going to have a little bit of a different approach on the next one, because the Tempo project has been offered the opportunity to make a presentation to the American Geophysical Union, which is, although the name, it's actually a global association of scientists engaged with the Earth. So I've been part of it as a seismologist. Tapio is part of it as an atmospheric scientist, and it's become the largest collection of climate scientists in the world. And we will be putting on an event December 12th. To see it in real time, you have to register for the conference. Sean Kirchner, who is with us today, is composing a new piece that we will hear for the first time there with a choir. It's being held in Chicago. However, even though you can't hear it in real time, we will be given the recording of it at the end of the conference. So December 15th, we will get it. We will add Japanese to it, and we will be getting it out to everyone who has been part of our community before the end of the year. So that will take the place of a December dialogue. We hope will appreciate it. We're trying hard to put it together from the science through the social science to the music. And we will then have start again with another dialogue in January or February when we've gotten through this and have time to think about the next one. So thank you all. We are close to our end. We will end with another piece of music from Kikuko. And thank you all for being part, and hope to see you with the next one. And Isa, if you can bring us up our music.
Yes, thank you. Before I play it as well, Kikuko, did you just want to give a quick introduction into Came From Where?
Thank you. So this piece, Where It Came From, refers to the notion where the children will start thinking of where they came from. So Konaka-san is one of the conductor or the percussionist playing within this music. So children are making motions, moving all around, but that was freely created by the children. So please enjoy.